Hey family, how you doing? It's your brother Vladimir Dees. I have something that I want to talk about very quickly, and it's kind of I like to think of it as kind of an embarrassment because I don't understand how people haven't thought about this. I was listening to somebody talk about police interactions in the black community, and I heard them make a reference to police officers as law enforcement. And over the last 6 years, as this has increasingly become something that people want to talk about, I've heard individuals say this. They'll be talking about policing, and then they'll call them law enforcement, and then they'll just continue on like they didn't say anything. And even now, I'm imagining that the majority of you listening to this video are going, okay, when are you going to get to your point? In fact, I've already made the point. I just haven't explained it to you. In talking about policing, we sometimes refer to them as law enforcement. You don't get it, do you? In talking about policing, we sometimes refer to them as law enforcement. As law enforcement. As law enforcement. Ladies and gentlemen, what law are they enforcing? We refer to them as law enforcement. We know nothing about the history of policing in this country. Most of us haven't thought that it was important enough to learn. We know nothing of why policing came into existence because policing didn't always exist. Did you know that? We don't know that. We don't know, for instance, that yes, there were slave bounty hunters and slave catchers, and there were bounty hunters and everything that existed outside of the slave system. But when slavery went away, bounty hunters didn't go away. We forget that, yes, there is that major connection between the slave patrols and modern policing. But the structure of policing didn't really come about because of you and I. See, this is one of the things that I have to keep emphasizing, family. We need to get over the idea that we don't need to read or research things that aren't directly related to us, because in the United States of America, many things that don't look like they're connected to you are in fact connected to you. And I know this because my passion has always been economic history. And what I'm finding as I'm going into economic history and the politics surrounding what I thought was just regular modern economic history, what I'm finding is all of this information, which is connected back to the civil rights era, that had everything to do with black people, yet it had nothing to do with black people. It is stuff that's not even on our radar. And yet, this stuff, which began back in the 1950s, is holding hostage the political system today. Stuff that you don't know nothing about. Stuff that you only know in passing about. We know about neoconservatives, and we'll say, well, that's the same thing as a liberal. They're all the same. You crazy if you think that. I may not like liberals. I may have a lot of negative things that I could say about white people. But doing the research that I've done and understanding exactly the points of emphasis where neoconservatism came from and how it has manifested like a cancer to take over this government, oh, you're playing with something far, 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 far worse and more dangerous than a liberal. The same thing goes with policing. We think of policing in terms of us. When the structures of policing, which can go back all the way, which can be traced back to, I believe, London, late 1700s, in America, didn't start to come about until the late 1800s. And not because of us. Because of strikers, unions and strikers. They were having issues with putting unions down and local people not wanting to do the dirt for the big corporations. So they started calling in external militias. And soon they then took a look around and said, we need a force that could combat these mega strikers, these mega strikes performed by these strikers, and we needed to be organized. And part of that organization was borrowed from London. Another part was borrowed from the military. And you then started seeing a multi-layered system of policing. Policing was not put there to protect and serve the average person. Policing was put there to protect and serve the propertied class, particularly those with the most money, those with the most clout, those with the most power. But we don't know that if we're just looking for the answer to policing in our history. We keep forgetting. They call you African American. Yeah, they call you Negro too, but they call you African American. That Africanness is connected to the Negroness. It's connected to slavery. It's connected to all of that. But what about that Americanness? We have done ourselves a major disservice, family. Major disservice. We've done ourselves a major disservice because we don't want to look deeply into history that doesn't directly involve us. And because of that, we are missing a lot of the picture that could actually be utilized to liberate us. A lot of it. A lot of it. There's a brother who posted some books. Let me see if I can pull this up very quickly. But he's the one who really, well, he didn't really help me understand it, but he did. Give me 1 second, family. He did bring me to a point of realizing just what people don't know. And because I've always been a person who liked economic history, because I was always a person who felt that it was necessary to do the type of work needed to find out why things were, not just how they were, but why. And my father used to tell me about this, but I assumed everybody did that. You have questions, ask them, get the answer, pursue the answer. Don't take no for an answer, But I'm realizing that is not how things, how a lot of people operate. Unfortunately, I thought that I had this right here. I had just gotten this past, and I can't find it now, so I'm gonna have to let that go. But he dropped some very good book titles, which I was hoping to be able to share with you. Let me see. Yeah. All right, so that's not gonna work. I'll have to find it and drop it off to you guys. Anyway, so the law aspect of law enforcement is never questioned. What is the law that they are imposing? Moreover, policing is a military exercise. Look at the structure of policing. There are national organizations. You can look at the structure of it and you will see automatically that it is a militaristic structure. It's a militaristic hierarchy. This is not to cast aversion and negativity towards police officers. This is just telling the truth. It is a military organization. It is a military organ. Therefore, if you expect for it to be a positive force in mending the social fabric of the community, that's not why it's there. That is not why it's there. If you want a force that's going to mend the fabric of the community, you need social workers. And here, I'm not talking about the bureaucratic social workers that we have now that work for the quote welfare system. Again, because I liked economic history, I found out about social workers from the late 1800s into the early and even mid 1900s. Dr. King would have probably considered himself a social worker, because a social worker was really about mending the problems caused by the unnatural system of capitalism. A social worker called out the unnatural system of capitalism and said, it really is this unnaturalness that is causing these problems. Because we haven't yet overthrown the system, we're going to fix the problems that are being caused by it. Now, today, we don't have social workers. We talk about charities, we talk about churches, we talk about a lot of things. But if you are beholden to a grantor, then the social work, and I believe this is 100% by design, because social workers back then didn't need much, and the prices were low enough where you didn't need much to help people. Today, you need a lot to help people. And so that puts you at the disposal of either the government, and considering that the government is now captured by this neoconservative, neo-libertarian juggernaut, which I spoke about a little bit earlier, that puts you in the hands of the corporateers. Or you can already be at the disposal of the corporateers. Social work, by its very existence, what it started out as, is very anti-capitalistic because it understood the problems that capitalism caused. It understood that it wasn't natural. It was very critical, even when it wasn't anti-capitalistic. It was very critical of capitalism. It was very critical of the wealthy. It was very critical of the big corporations. A lot of your activists today, in a previous life, if they were alive 100 years ago, 150 years ago, would have probably been social workers. Social workers, though, and this needs to be stressed, they were dangerous to big businesses because the social worker reminded the employees and those who they helped of a time period when you were supposed to be that way, where it was natural and normal to be that way, where the commonwealth was the jewel of the society. Not hyper-individualism, not hyper-exploitation, not working people into the ground, not working people, 10, 12, 15, 16 hours a day for 10 cents, 15 cents an hour. Not because you didn't have enough money to pay them more, but because you didn't want to pay them more. Social workers reminded them of this. So they were a threat. Unsurprisingly, in the 1950s, part of the McCarthy period that happened, social workers were rooted out from academia, Hollywood, industry, where they were working in industry, communities, east to west. They were rooted out and they were blacklisted. Many of them went up to Canada. It's kind of ironic. Many of them went up to Canada. The ones that did stay in the United States, most of them went to the civil rights movement or to later on the anti-war movement, or just fell off the face of the earth. Just said, okay, if I'm going to be blacklisted, I'm just going to, live however I can live and let it all go. It was the excavation of these people, along with your communists and your socialists, which really put the United States onto the track in which we now find ourselves now, of this authoritarian, totalitarian, oligarchic society or social structure, because we went from a time period, I'm talking about the Depression now, where people had to come together. And a lot of those doing the coming together of pulling people together, socialists, communists, anarchists, social workers. All the people who you're told today were anti-American. Those were the people bringing people together. Those were the people saying we need to do better. And I'm talking, there were black members of most of these groups. I haven't been able to find any black anarchists, but there were black socialists, there were black communists, and I know there were black social workers. So I just haven't been able to find any black anarchists. But these people were so effective in that in order to take control of the society, the wealthy had to get rid of them. And today even, we can't even fathom being social workers on the level that they were social working like back then. We can't. And so our society has suffered from that. our community, black people's community, most of our preachers were, if they weren't out and out social workers, they subscribed to the social gospel. And the social gospel spoke of social work. Now, if you don't know what the social gospel is, Google it. You can go to archive.org, 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 and type in social gospel. Get some of the books from the late 1800s to see what I'm talking about with this. They were preaching a different gospel. This gospel of prosperity nonsense, nope, not even close to what they were talking about. Check it out. I mean, it was that powerful gospel which moved many socialists and communists to action. And guess who was against those socialists and communists? It was law enforcement. And law enforcement wasn't against them because they were doing criminal activities. They were against them because the socialists and the communists were against their paymasters. Now, we often talk about police officers working for the communities, that they supposedly serve. Well, here's the thing, and this is something that I just found out recently, even though I kind of thought about this a while ago. Prior to the 1910s, there was not an income tax. So any service that you pretty much got from your local government, from your regional government, you didn't pay for. The big bosses paid for, so they owned it. That included your police officers, law enforcement. With the income tax and the movement of the income tax higher and higher, especially on the wealthy, because originally the income tax was only meant for the wealthy. With that occurring, then basic services could be met. And that helped to transfer some of those perks that the wealthy used to kind of pay for periodically, not everywhere either, by the way, to the masses, or should I say to your pocket, and it enabled you to, for instance, have, free sewage, clean water, things like that. That's what all that did. It also gave you things like fire service, much later on, ambulance service, and policing. That's important to note because, again, if we're going to be truthful and honest about, I didn't even realize that was glaring, family. Sorry about that. If we're going to be truthful and honest about policing, then that's how we got it to where it is today. Now, I keep coming back to this idea of law enforcement because there is a law that has been talked about a lot in the last 100 or so years, and that's Darwinian law. Darwinian law speaks about the whole survival of the fittest. And that's important for us because Dr. Boyce Watkins was talking about how he was talking with Elder Anthony Browder, and the elder was saying how in the 1970s and 80s, black people was moving forward. We were doing some things, man. We were getting it together. And the government put agent provocateurs into our community to do nothing more than to spread confusion. Check out Boyce Watkins' Your Black World video, just Your Black World. There's a video called ADOS Needs an Intervention. Check that out. It's a good video. The elder, though, said that he was tragically sad that they had fallen for that. They had fallen for that. And then he said that today the same thing was likely going on. Now, this is important. Why? Because if it's survival of the fittest, if the police are there to implement a law, and let's say that law happens to be Darwinism. Well, survival of the fittest. Well, if they're implementing survival of the fittest, that means they're there to stop us from uniting and posing a challenge to the white man. Now, it just so happens that I listened to a speech by Asa Hilliard III, the great ancestor who is now rising in power, up with the ancestors, technically down with the ancestors. We'll have to get into that on another day, man, because that whole hollow earth thing, I used to not believe it, but I believe it now. Anyway, and he mentioned sort of the same thing on this work, this action, these actions, should I say, that the white man is continuously doing to target us. And man, I'm really sorry, guys. Let me see. Yep, that should work. All right. So there are things that the white man is continuously doing to target us in order to stop us from coming together so we can rise. And if Darwinism feeds into that law which is being enforced, then that makes a lot of sense, family. Because as Philippe Jacques Mathieu pointed out, and man, do I believe this. He said he was talking to, I think it was a Jewish scholar. They were talking about emotional intelligence. This is something that over the last 20 years, white people have begun to understand at a scientific level. Before, they used to think emotions were a bad thing. That's because half of them were psychopathic. And that their pineal glands were still really freeze-dried. So, they weren't really feeling much of nothing. They were just acting on that lower levels of the brain. With this newer generation, I don't know if it's the sun, if it's this, the technology and all of the radiation, or if it's just time for it to take place. But that pineal gland is starting to become activated in these people, and you can tell. It's driving some of them crazy. But, so they were learning about emotional intelligence, and this Jewish scholar said that when you, with all things equal, actually not even with all things equal, no matter what, when you put together emotional intelligence and mental intelligence into a person, and how did he say it? If I remember correctly, it was when black people combine their emotional intelligence and their mental intelligence, they compete and defeat. They compete and they defeat all other candidates, all other people. And this makes a lot of sense to me. About 10 years ago, I read a book on emotional intelligence, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating mainly because what is the one thing that people say about black people? You too damn emotional. You have way too much emotion. You need to get your emotions under control in order to go into the world and to do X, Y, and Z. It was intriguing to me when I read that book. And I said to myself, it would make sense that there would have to be an intelligence behind it, because why would the Most High give you emotions if they weren't supposed to be an asset? If they weren't supposed to be positive? Now, I know what most of you are thinking. Are you going to show us the book? Are you going to show us the book? Are you just, not going to leave it there and be like, I read a book on... I will show you the book. Give me 1 second. All right, so I'm back. So again, all right, so this is the book. All right, this is the book. It's a bit older, so Daniel Gollum. I'm confident that I've showed you guys this book before, but again, it makes a lot of sense. You can also get the new Psycho-Cybernetics, which I pulled from a Anthony Browder video. A very good book. Oh my God, a very good book. In fact, it's a book that came out. The original one came out back in the 1960s, and might have even been in the late 50s. But reading it, I'm thinking there are some black folks in our community and leadership positions that might have read that book. It's a good book. The New Psycho-Cybernetics. So when we put together our emotional and our mental, we not only compete, but we win. Now, this makes a lot of sense to me because there's another area of scientific study which, it's it's another one of them things that doesn't bode well, according to the scientific evidence, which is called physical intelligence. Now, we know that there has been a sports science for the longest time. But there is, in that sports science, there is a broader physical science, which is meant to create the perfect specimen and get the most out of your physical body. From that information, from those studies, I suppose, was extracted the physical intelligence. Now, physical intelligence has been around for a long time. You could go into the Chinese, the Japanese martial arts, and you see a lot on physical intelligence. You go into the modern yoga practices, again, a lot on the physical intelligence, but we just don't call it that. We just call it, something else, mind-body meld or something. So the information that is being gathered, though, says what? Again, the most perfect specimens, the people with the most reflective and reactive bodies, the people with the most ability to control their body is who? Us. Now, physical intelligence isn't just about running, jumping, flipping, and all of that stuff. No. There is some real wisdom in your body. You can actually store information, and they know this. The Europeans have done this research. You can store information in portions of your body. You can actually store memories in portions of your body. In fact, half of what you think of as being stored in your brain isn't stored in your brain. It's stored throughout your body. You can place, and some of you know this, you can place stress in various places of your body. You hear some people say, oh, I carry the stress in my shoulders, I carry it in my lower back, I carry it in my thighs, or even I carry it in my chest, which is what happens with the heart muscle. You carry it there too much and heart muscle gets in some trouble. That tells you right there that there is a broader physical intelligence that is aligned with your mind, but is separate from your mind. Because your mind can put things into your body and leave it there, isolate it to forget about it. When you clean that up, when you clean up your physical and you get your physical working well, And then you put that together, mental intelligence, physical intelligence, emotional intelligence. Need I say more? And you wonder why these people are starting to react the way they're reacting to you. I want to throw something at your family. Again, we're talking about law enforcement, or I'm talking about law enforcement. You're listening. We know, thank you, Phil Valentine, that a lot of these white folks, their pineal glands are starting to open up, especially younger white persons. Now, notice that the majority of the people who are getting involved with these shootings, look at their ages. Look at their ages. Most of these people aren't above the age of 40. Most of them are not above the age of 40. Okay? So, what the heck's going on? Where these people are reacting in a way which is very deadly. Now, of course, you'll say, well, this has been going on forever, man, so come on. You know, it's just what it is. I'm not saying that it hasn't. However, there seems to be a different air to this one. Okay, if you go back 40 years ago, okay, we were hated because of the civil rights movement, and white people were just racist. That's fine. You fast forward to now, crime has been plummeting. White people, for all the bad things that they have done to us, they weren't really shooting us that much, or at least the cops weren't really shooting us that much in these numbers. I know there's some people who have made statements, including yours truly, tying some of this to initiation into the fraternal order. But I also say to you that as these people are starting to come online, the eyes are starting to see things. Their mind is starting to hear things. And they don't understand that. I mean, most of us walk around. And I've seen black people where you could tell their pineal glands aren't active. They act differently. They are differently. Or should I say they are different, not differently. But they are different. You can tell a black person whose pineal gland isn't on. There's this staticness to their personality. There's this ignorance and this overhyped arrogance. Even their voice is different. But a white person, because most of them don't have active pineal glands, you could tell, when you come across one that has an active one. But it's almost shocking to watch them. I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. It's almost shocking to watch a white person, because I've come across a couple who I think their pineal glands are starting to be opened, and it's shocking watching them suddenly come online, as I like to call it, and see the world from a broader place. And you can tell it's shocking for them too. And so it's almost like, to me, how I want to say this, is that with their minds opening up, some of these people are being psychically driven to make these shots. Others are seeing black people in their true power. And that is what's driving them to kill them. Because if you see black people in their true power, we're gods. We're goddesses. We are entities that exist on another plane. We're just here periodically, And if you start seeing that, that shocks the heck out of you. That blows your mind. Especially if you're white and you've been stuck here and your pineal gland is inactive. But all of that's, I guess, for another day. I want to get back to, briefly, because I only intended this to be like a 15-minute video. I want to get back to the idea of law. Because you have two types of law. You have a spiritual law, and on this planet you have a physical law. And we are now seeing the physical law being overturned and revealing another law. And that's kind of why I asked the question about, okay, what law are they enforcing? Because there is a confusing mess which exists as the physical law. But if you start looking at some of the statements made by the wealthy, you can tell that they believe in a different physical law. And I believe that different physical law is Darwinian. Okay, I'm actually going to end it there because, like I said, I intended this to be a 15-minute video, and I've been going on for about 42 minutes. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. You know, I always love hearing from you guys. I got work to do over the coming week, but right now, I'm relaxing. Peace, siblings. Peace.